On that note, though, Ryan, it was when you were talking about how Netanyahu was making the point about having people who can string English sentences together, it reminded me that Jared Kushner
he unfortunately can string sentences together.
He was stringing those sentences together. An interview with The Guardian, and there is video of a fascinating exchange between The Guardian and Jared Kushner about Gaza. Let's take a look at that.
In Syria, when there's refugees, Turkey took them, Europe took them, Jordan took them. For whatever reason, here in Gaza, there's refugees from the fighting, from an offensive attack that was staged from Gaza. Israel's going in to do a long-term deterrence mission. And it's unfortunate that nobody's taking the refugees.
But also there are real fears on the part of Arabs, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of them, who think once Gazans leave Gaza, Netanyahu's never going to let them back in.
Maybe, but I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. So, if you think about even the construct, Gaza was not really a historical precedent, right? It was the result of a war, right? You had tribes that were in different places, but then Gaza became a thing. Egypt, used to run it. And then, over time, you had different governments that came in different ways. So you have another war, usually when wars happen, borders are changed historically over time. And so my sense is I would say, how do we deal with the terror threat that is there so that it cannot be a threat to Israel or to Egypt, right? I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions, if that would have gone into education or innovation.
Biden should recognize the Palestinian Authority unilaterally as a state, and MBS should go to Jerusalem like Egyptian President Anwar Sadat did in 1977, and he should say, I'll normalize with Israel, I'll recognize West Jerusalem as your capital, and I'll even pay to rebuild Gaza if you recognize a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. What do you think? Good idea?
No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that there's certain elements of it that are correct. I think proactively recognizing a Palestinian state would essentially be rewarding an act of terror.
Waterfront property, he said, if the money from the tunnels would have been redirected, I think he said towards education and innovation, but it was in the context actually talking about how you could redevelop Gaza into, quote, very valuable waterfront property. Ryan, what's your reaction to that?
Well, there was also that line he had where he said, for whatever reason, there's refugees. Okay, for whatever reason, interesting. Then he also said that Gaza is a construct. So just Google to make sure. Wikipedia says the known history of Gaza is it spans 4,000 years. In Pompeii took it at one point. Alexander the Great took it at one point. Bedouins lived there for many years. In fact, the IDF has tragically destroyed archaeological sites that are some of the most kind of important to archaeology in the world, have destroyed buildings that are from the 6th and 7th century. Just irreplaceable and tragic destruction. So the idea that Kushner says Gaza is a construct of the 20th century kind of expulsion of people from their land and what was Palestine is absurd. It is true that many of the current residents of Gaza are refugees from elsewhere in what is now Israel. But the idea that the city itself is like a construct literally ignores 4,000 years of history. But what could be more tone deaf than Jared Kushner, a real estate developer, talking about the value of the waterfront property
who negotiated,
in Gaza.
Right, who negotiated the Abraham Accords,
right,
and was basically Trump's point man on negotiating with Israel, period, in the Middle East, period.
Right. If anybody was responsible for the failure of our policy and the entire policy in the region, it's Jared Kushner, whose bright idea, and this is not to blame just Kushner. He was the moron that put it forward, but he had an entire Republican administration apparatus behind him that pushed it forward. And then he had an entire Democratic administration that adopted the framing of it, which was to say, we are going to normalize relations with all of the Arab countries in the region, leading with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and we're going to do it by pretending the Palestinian question does not exist anymore. just taking it off the table. I mean, it's kind of an interesting, like third grade kind of approach to it. It's like, it's a really intractable problem. How do you solve this? And he's like, what if we don't? Hear me out. And the region, and that's why I don't blame him. Like, that's an idiotic thing to say. The real idiots are the ones who are like, this kid's got an idea. Let's just pretend it does. Let's just pretend the problem isn't there, and then we'll sign all of these accords. And Hamas has said that it launched its attack because Saudi Arabia was getting so close to normalizing with Israel and pretending that the Palestinians didn't exist. Now, you can obviously Hamas has agency, did what did. You can condemn that. The U.S. has agency, Saudi Arabia has agency, Israel has agency. It was predicted and predictable, what the consequences would be when you say that, oh, there's this intractable problem and let's just ignore it and it'll go away.
So the other thing Kushner said, quote, I'm sitting in Miami Beach right now and I'm looking at the situation and I'm thinking, what would I do if I was there? So another point just
If he was in Gaza?
If he was in, but he's sitting in Miami Beach, more very valuable waterfront property. But to the point of the interview, by the way, it's stamped with The Guardian because I think The Guardian was they must have been the first report on this. This was actually not an interview with The Guardian. It was in an interview with the Harvard Middle East Initiative faculty chair. So it wasn't
reported by The Guardian.
Reported by The Guardian, right?
Yeah.
And they stamped their logo on the video, which is where
Good
I
for
got
them.
thrown off.
Yeah.
But yes,
We'll put our logo on top of theirs.
we should, yes, we may already have done that. But Ryan, you were at another State Department briefing asking questions. I think this was about UNRWA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this goes to the question of what will Gaza become, when and if there is a day after this war, and it goes to the question of UNRWA funding. And actually, don't want to spoil it. We'll just roll this back and forth with me and State Department spokesperson Vinay Patel.
When you originally talked about the allegations against the 12 staff, you had said that UNRWA itself was the one that forwarded those allegations along. You said that you found them credible, but since then, UNRWA itself has said that its staff were tortured by Israel in order to get some of those confessions extracted. Does that change your view of the evidence that was presented by Israel? And if UNRWA was credible enough for you to believe the allegations the first time, is UNRWA credible enough when they make an allegation of torture against its staff?
I've not seen that reporting, Ryan, but I will just note that we continue to find the allegations that were laid out a number of months ago to be credible. And we also welcome the swiftness at which UNRWA informed not just the United States, but others about this, but also the swiftness in which the United Nations launched its own investigation mechanism and its own independent review. And we look forward to seeing those results. And to echo Secretary Blinken, we want these allegations thoroughly investigated so that there is clear accountability and measures put in place so this doesn't happen again. And we want all this to happen because we believe very strongly that UNRWA plays a critical role in producing life-saving assistance in the region, not just in Gaza, but the broader Middle East as well. They are vital players when it comes to food, medicine, shelter, and other humanitarian support.
Your position, which is in opposition, as they said, to so many allies around the world, has encouraged Congress to move forward with a ban. There's now an agreement between some Democrats and some Republicans to continue the ban, I think, throughout the rest of the year. Is that something that the State Department would support, tying the State Department's hands, even if the report comes back?
You've heard me talk about this before broadly when it comes to the supplemental bill that is being negotiated in Congress. These are active and ongoing things that are happening, so I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole too much. But broadly, we support the contours of this supplemental bill.
So he says, we believe that UNRWA plays an important role in relief efforts, but also we're okay with Congress barring us from restarting funding for it.
Because
How do you
presidents
make that make sense for me?
presidential administrations are often so cool with Congress stepping in and doing things that they care about. Yes, that's if presidents care about war powers, it's basically so that they want Congress to have more power instead of them, which is obviously completely backwards. They want to prosecute these wars entirely on their own, and now they're using Congress as a crutch, which is funny because they basically are constantly blaming Congress of being overly meddlesome in the business of prosecuting war.
Right. But when it comes to banning the U.S. from funding UNRWA, which they say is a valuable part of the relief effort, not going to go down that rabbit hole. They're going to do what they're going to do.
Rabbit hole. Yeah.
And also, how are you not familiar with this massive reporting that UNRWA has said that its staff was tortured into making confessions about, UNRWA complicity with Hamas? That's a rather important element if you actually are serious about getting to the bottom of this.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they enjoy answering your questions in the briefing. I like how it's like,
I don't know how much longer I can keep going. It's increased. It seems it's increasingly pointless.
it's exhausting.
I got to do some self-care after each one of those.
The rabbit hole quote was pretty interesting in that one.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.